Have you ever thought about designing a cookbook mobile app in Figma? In this video, we are crafting an excellent single cookbook application that would challenge your design skills. Come along as we dive into Figma and we create interactive components like review components, button components, profile components, all in Figma. By the end of this video, you will learn how to create nested auto layouts to make your designs in Figma smooth and polished. If you want to follow along, you can find the Figma community file in the description down below. Let's jump right into it. So if I go and create my components, I can now add these as an instance swap. So here, instead of components, I can call this icon, and then I can basically create another page called this button. Let me just also create a separation between the sample and the components. So here in my button, what I need to do is grab my icon. So here I would do Shift and I to search for components, and in this example I have add. I would search for add. Here you see we have this drop down. We don't want to have components added from other libraries, so I want to make sure that I am bringing the components that I have created in this file. So here I would just drag this. Now we have our instance. So what we need to do right now is wrap an auto layout around this and add instance swap to be able to basically make a swap. So here we have the button, so Shift and A to create an auto layout. Let's just go ahead and give it a padding of 24. 24 is a bit too much, so we can reduce this to 16 and now create this button. So in this example, I would just rename this to button, and our button was rounded, so we can just make it rounded, but here we don't see it. So what we need to do is give it a fill. So in this example, we give it 100 and we need to give it a stroke. So we can add the stroke, and the stroke color, we can use it from our library that we created. So let's just go ahead and give it a stroke of 30. The same thing with the icons here. We would just basically give it a 30. So we have our button icon created. So I can drag this out and then cut. And now if I basically try to paste this, we have our first icon button created. And what you notice is each of these, either they have a text underneath or they don't. So we can add that in the component and make it conditional in the component set. So what we do is we go to our button. Here we have the add icon inside the button. So before we do anything, let's just go ahead and see how it will look like if we want to add this. So if we go ahead and add the text underneath, you see if we try to drag it, it gets added inside the actual component set. So we don't want that, and we already created a component. So we don't really want to detach the component. So what we need to do is wrap a nested auto layout. So in this example, we need to wrap an auto layout around our, let's call this label, and our add, Shift and A, and change the direction from horizontal to vertical. So by doing that, now we have our buttons created. But we don't want the background color and padding to be added around. We want it to be added only to the plus icon. So what we need to do is, for example, call this div and go ahead and use Command, Option, and C to copy this and then give this to the icon, Command, Option, and V. But as you can see, it's actually applying this to the icon, and we don't want that. So let's just Command Z that, add another auto layout and call this icon. And now we can do Command, Option, and V to add that wrapper around the icon frame, not the actual icon. And what we can do is go to the main component button and then just remove all of the properties, which is the padding, the background color. And now here inside the label, we can basically change it to the gray. So let's just go ahead and change it to gray, push this down. And what we need to do is basically make the background white so we can see our component. And we can click on our icon and reset everything. So here we can reset all the changes, so it is actually reset it back to normal, but you see it really doesn't take an effect. So what you need to do is make sure to take a look at your auto layout, and in this example it is set to fill. We don't want that. We want this to be set to basically the original size, which is 24, and then we want the color to be gray 30. And now we have our button, which is basically the icon and the text underneath. So what you can do is you can even click on the button and turn this into an auto layout, which is already an auto layout, and then just drag these out. So we basically remove one unnecessary auto layout, clean it up, make sure this is center aligned. Let's call this label as well. And then what we can do is basically add something called text property. Why? Because here, if I click on my button, I have no ability to change the actual label other than clicking and changing it this way. And also, if we add text property, if we decide to change our properties, the value inside the component is not lost. So again, by creating a text property, you're technically creating a variable It is again not variable here in Figma, but by doing that, you are preserving the label, which is in this example text. So what I would do is I would double click on the label, create a text property. We can call this button label. There we go. And now if I click on my instance, now I have the ability to create a share button. But what you notice is I don't have the ability to swap an icon. So I need to click on my master and now click on the add instance. And then by doing that, I have now the ability to create the instance swap by clicking on that tiny icon. If you're not familiar with these component properties and all that, I do have a tutorial that explains in detail what is component property, what is text property. So you can take a look at that video if you want to learn more about properties and components. But by doing that, I now basically add my icons, and what I can do is I can add plus and make sure I check that. By doing that, I'm selecting all the icons and I have them to be my preferred value. So this way, when I create the icon instance property, I can now select my instance, and instead of the add icon, I can search for share. There we go, we have our share. So here we would search for add, and now we have our add. And what we need to do is change the label to add. And this is how easy it is for us to swap between different icons and create reusable components. So let me cut this and go back to the sample. We have share and basically likes. So in this example, we need to go ahead and do that. I think we didn't add the heart. Okay, we did. So here we will add that, and let's just go ahead and add the values. So in this example, it's 3.71K. And what we need to do is basically wrap a frame around these to basically create our mobile frame so we can see how we are building this mobile prototype. So here I'm going to click on my frame. We have all these options. So let's just go ahead and select one, iPhone 16 Pro Max. And what I usually do is I would create an auto layout right away because I do want to have the ability to drag everything inside the auto layout frame and have a more refined control over this. So here for this iPhone 16, I need to group these two. Again, another auto layout. I can call this again div, and then I can center align them. So we are basically center aligning the share and like, which is being placed in the middle. What we need to do is now have our back button added to the top. And in this example, we don't want to have the back button to be labeled. So what we need to do is basically click and visit our component. And in this example, we can click on the label and add another property, which is called Boolean under appearance. So here we can just leave it as show label. So by doing that, I can now go to the sample and then duplicate this and basically bring it out. And I have this show label. So if I basically hide it, you see the button label is being hidden. And if you don't like this, we can basically go and reorder this. So we can drag this show label to the top and even rename this to show button label. So by doing that, now we are showing and hiding the button label. In this example, we don't want the label, so we can just remove it and then search for chevron, and now we have our back button created. So these two buttons are fairly big, which is in the middle. They are having the same size. What we notice is we have another variant, which is this one with the plus, but it doesn't have the fully rounded look and feel. So what we can do is basically go to the button label and now add another variant, which is this one. Now we're adding another variant, and the only difference is basically we're reducing the rounded corner. Let's just go ahead and make it 8. So this would be our second variation. And if I click on my button, we have property 1 created. So we can just call this is rounded, or basically call this rounded. Here we can call this rounded and give it a true, and the other one we can just give it a false. And by doing that, if I now click on my sample and visit this, I can just duplicate, drag this out and add a plus. And in this example, you see it doesn't give me a result. So maybe the keyword is add. So I can click add, I can hide the label, and now I can turn off the rounded. And you see how easy it is for me to switch between different instances as well as different variants. So now what I need to do is create my basically top and then place the icon here. So let's just go ahead and do that the way we need to create our image component. So let's just go ahead, create another basically page, call this image, copy that and then paste it here. And now we have our button. We can shift an A to create an auto layout and then basically drag this to basically a random size. It really doesn't matter because we use auto layout to align this. And in this example, I use a plugin called Unsplash. So let's just go ahead and use Unsplash plugin and search for chicken. And then let's just go ahead and select this chicken. We're happy with this, and what we can do is call this cover image and then create basically a component, drag this out, and then here we can just align it to the top. For the back button, cut this, go back to the sample, paste this here, and then we can move this to the top. And then here, all I need to do is use auto layout to make it fill, and I can click on my iPhone 16 and remove all the padding, and that's it. Here I have my cover image created, so I can just drag it a little bit to kind of replicate the chicken on the other one. So here we have this name of the chicken, so let's just go ahead and then paste this. So I just typed in the name of the recipe, and then what I need to do is search for a font that is as closest to this one. So I can filter by some popular fonts and then see which one is the closest to this one. Or what you can do is go by alt font and search for something that is a serif font. So if I go ahead and search for some serif fonts, we have this one, for example, DM serif display. So I can select that and give it 20 pixels, leave it as regular, and then create a text style out of this one. So I can call this H1, create the text style, cut that, and now I can add that to my iPhone, move it to the top. And here I notice it is a bit small. So what I can do is basically go to my text and increase it a little bit to like 24, or maybe even a little bit higher, 32. And what I need to do is Shift and A to create an auto layout, and then I use center align to make sure that this is center aligned. Call this again div or frame, and then leave it here as is. And if I click on my actual iPhone, I want to make sure to have a space between each of the elements. So let's just go ahead and add 24. So we have our recipe almost created. We need to create the stars and the text underneath. So here under image, we can create another page called ratings, and then let's just go ahead and search for icon. Let's just go ahead to search for star. And then here I do see the stars, so I can click basically the star that is filled. Let's just go ahead and add that. And in this example, I need to create 5 of them. So let me just duplicate this 5 times. And I do want to wrap an auto layout around this and call this stars. And if I go back to the sample, we have based on 21 ratings. So let's just go ahead and add this text underneath. So based on 21 ratings. And for this one, I don't want this to be serif H1. I want to use a sans serif font, which is enter, and I would reduce this to 16 or maybe even 14 pixels and leave it in the middle. Give this a gray that we just created, gray 30. And for the stars, I would just basically make it primary 60. And now I would wrap another auto layout around this and call this ratings. I would center align this, maybe just give it 8 and create a component out of this. Drag this out, go to the sample page and click on the iPhone 16, paste this, move it to the top. And then here, since this is an auto layout, I can simply make it basically go all the way across the screen. And now we have our ratings created. So we need to add our share and favorite basically button. So we would just move that to the top, use auto layout, center align it. There we go. So we basically created the top, header, rating, and the share and like. Let's just make it maybe 16. There we go. Now we need to create the profile. So basically the profile picture, name, link, and some description. So the way we would create this is basically using again a circle. So let's just go ahead and create a circle. For the profile picture, we might want to go with like 96 for the profile. And then we have again the name. And then if I go ahead to basically drag the second one is basically, and then here I can call this title, and then finally we can call the last one link. The link doesn't have any underline, but I think it would be nice to add an underline for the link. So here we add an underline, we auto layout these 3, and then we auto layout it with the one which is on the left side. We can call this entire component profile, but what is missing is basically the description. So the description, instead of actually calling this profile, you can call this div, add another auto layout, and then basically copy this, add it at the bottom, and that would be the description. And now we can call this entire thing profile, and then create a component out of this. And what we need to do is now basically try to make sure we fill the information. So if I go ahead and take a look at this one, we can click on this and again use unsplash to come up with like a profile picture. Let's just use this one for the profile, and then Here we see that we have this as the image. We have the other ones as basically name, title, and link. So what we need to do is click on the link, make it primary 60, which is good. Click on the title, make that gray 10. Click on the name, make that gray 30. And also when it comes to the names, we do want to make sure it fills the entire container. Here, the spacing between them, we want to reduce it to maybe like 8. And then we do want the name, title, and link to be left aligned. And if I press return on my keyboard to select all of them, I do want them to be left aligned as well. And the spacing between them, I do want it to be 8 only. And the last thing that is missing is the description. So here we would give this also gray 30, making sure this is left aligned. We would give this 14 pixels. Also the title, we would just give it 16, making sure it is medium. Move that to the top, and the name, we can leave this as 14 as well. The same thing with the link, we can leave this as 14. And for the description, I can create basically 2 line breaks and basically use Figma AI to rewrite this. So let's just go ahead and use Figma AI to rewrite a profile description. So we have our profile description created for us, and then here you see that our profile is created. So we have the read more. So what we can do is we can add the read more at the bottom of this one. So here we can copy this, paste this, and then call this read more. And then what we can do is make it a little bit medium in terms of font and remove the underline. And if we want to have the dots added, we can click on the profile and add truncations, and then we can just give it like 3 lines. There we go. So this way it's actually truncated, and then if they click read more, they would be able to read more about this. What we can do is click on this one and use Figma AI to replace this again with content. Let's go ahead and rewrite this. So here Figma AI tried its best to come up with this one. So like, let's just write replace with name. So it really didn't replace this with name. So what we can do is actually copy this, use that as the job title, and then here we can just call this the famous John Doe. There we go. So we have our profile created. So we can add that in another separate page if you want to. But since these are only single components, we can actually combine all of them into a page called components, which we have our button. So we can paste our profile here. We can basically cut and paste our image and then also our rating, because this is going to be a simple mobile app. We no longer need to create a very complex like multi-page mobile application. If you do decide to have a multi-page mobile application, then yes, you want to separate out your components. But in this example, I think we just want to do a quick mobile app. So we can paste this here. And if I go ahead, making sure this is fill container, here we see we have this created and each of them have a separation. So what I can do is select this profile, go back to the component, making sure it is like 16 pixels around. I can give it a stroke from top to bottom. Here in this example, I do want to make sure the direction is set to custom. 1 pixel at the down, 1 pixel at the top. And instead of black, I would go with like 30%. Maybe it is too dark. So we need to create another color. So we would go with like 90. And in this example, we would create a color out of this one. So we create our borders, and what we need to do is basically give it the gray 90. And now we have our borders created. So if I take a look at this one, you see that we have our chicken landing page with share and rating. We have our profile, which is good. And then finally the reviews at the bottom. So what we can do is basically duplicate that, bring it to the top, and then basically detach this one. And now we can, instead of profile, call this a reviews. So in reviews, we don't have a profile picture, so we can simply delete that. We don't have borders, so let's just go ahead and remove the borders from all directions. And then we have a read, which is all the way to the right side, and description. So let's just go ahead, keep this read, and then just call this read. And what we can do is make this hug. Make sure it goes all the way to the right side. So let's just go ahead, remove the description, ungroup that, because we no longer need any of them. We just need basically the John Doe, and the other one, Shift and A, make it basically go from top to bottom, making it hug, and then add the read inside the auto layout between them. So here we have, let me just drag this out, give it just basically a background color so we see what's going on. So if I collapse everything, we have the review. Here it is set to hug. We can set the parent review to hug as well. And then here we can just drag one extra frame out. We no longer need that. So let's just go ahead and call that other one review. Let's also give this a white background color. There we go. So here we have the review, which is the parent set to hug. We can press return on our keyboard. This frame is set to hug, and we can press return again on our keyboard. You see the text is not set to hug, so we can make the text set to hug, and then we can click on this one, making it like 20 and making it semi-bold. We can call this reviews, and then the other one we can call this 64 comments dash like 23 images, and that's it. So that is our review footer. So let's just go ahead and create a component out of this one. But what you notice is the read is outside, so what we need to do is fix that. So this frame, let's rename this to div, making sure it's set to fill. As soon as we set it to fill, we have the read being placed at the outside, so we can cut that and paste it here next to the rest of the components. Use option to basically drag an instance out, use iPhone, paste that at the bottom, and then here we no longer need this, and then we no longer need that. And that's it. This is how we manage to create, let's just give it a darker background color. So this is how we manage to create our reviews. What you notice is our reviews doesn't have a padding, so we can click and navigate to reviews, giving it a 16 pixels of padding all around. And that's it. So we created the mobile application, which is again just the first flow of the saving recipes. I hope you enjoyed it and learned how to use auto layout and components. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more design tips and tutorials, and let me know what you think in the comments down below.